For the altered clothing project, you can use any type of clothing you want, even accessories that are wearable, things like a belt, a hat, shoes, a scarf. Those things are good too. I decided to do an example using an apron. This is one of the aprons that has paint all over it from my painting classes. Like that. It's important though to first start with a sketch, always, because I'm going to embroider on this, but I want to know what I'm doing before I start. So I did this sketch. This is a product design logo that I made last year for this class. It looks like a sun, but it's not. It's a taco. And I thought that might look kind of cool with product design written under it. But then I thought that the words were maybe a little bit too small. And so the beauty of doing a sketch first is that you can try it a different way. So I did this one, and I think I like that design better. It's more obvious. The words are more obvious, and so if I'm wearing this apron walking down the hall, people will be more likely to recognize this as the logo for product design because it tells you it's product design. So I'm gonna go with this design, and rather than just starting with a needle, you can, if you're doing embroidery on fabric, you can draw on the fabric first. And it's best to use something that will wash off. This, I meant to grab a charcoal pencil, and this was in the wrong bin, so it's actually a white Crayola pencil. But charcoal is good because it's, when you wash it, it will dissolve. So if it's a darker fabric like jeans or something like this, you can use a white charcoal pencil. They also make special fabric pencils that are made for sewing that are water soluble, and you wash it and it goes away. I'm not going to worry about this too much because I'm going to sew over what I'm drawing, and so I don't think you'll end up seeing it. So you want to figure out generally how big you want something. You might want to work with a ruler, especially if it's something that's more geometric in nature. I'm going to eyeball it for today just because this is a quick demo. But I want to make sure that I have enough room for my product design words, which I'm going to put here. And then room for the taco and the rays of light emanating from the taco. So I'm making, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm making these kind of rainbow shaped marks just to give me a guideline of what I'm going to draw. And then I'm drawing the actual taco right now. I'll put this up closer to the camera so you can see in a minute. And then the little rays. I've drawn this a lot of times, so I know how many rays I want and everything, like it's part of my logo design. But make sure, if you're drawing something that's new to you, that you plan everything out ahead of time, which I guess is what we're doing right now. You can kind of see that on the camera. So I've got my taco, I've got my lines, and then I wanted to say product design. When you're working with words, you want everything to be centered. So it's actually good to work with the middle of the word first, and then move out from there to make sure that your word is centered. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 letters in product, so I'm going to count in 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3, and 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3. So you can see that the D is right in the middle. So I'm going to start with my D, right above that large ray, and then space the other letters out to fit. That T I think is a little bit too close. This is why using a charcoal pencil would be better, because then I could get rid of that bit. I'll just scoot it over a little. And then I'll go the other direction and do the rest of my word. It's good to just have your sketch there. You all know how to spell, but when you're drawing letters rather than writing letters, there is a difference. It's easy to get kind of mixed up and draw the wrong thing. There's the R. The P. Okay, got my product, I've got my taco and rays of light, and now the bottom needs to say design. So again, working 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the middle. This one's an even number, so I'm going to go in 3 letters on each side, and we know that SI is the middle of this word. So the middle of the taco is right about here. I'll do my S to one side of it, that midpoint line, and then the I to the other side of it. And then make sure your spacing looks consistent across the word. I spaced this word out a little bit more than I did this one because I wanted it to fill the whole taco shape. And then my E. And okay, so now, let me put this closer to the camera so you can see, but I have a map of what I'm going to sew. Ideally, if you're familiar with embroidery, there's something called an embroidery hoop that you could put this in, and it keeps your fabric nice and stretched out. It's not 100% necessary, but if you have one and if you know what I'm talking about, use it. So as far as other supplies that I'm going to use on this, I need scissors. I need this stuff. This is called embroidery thread or embroidery floss. And it comes in little packages like this. You can find it at the craft stores, Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Joann Fabrics. Sometimes I think you can find it sometimes at Walmart, and of course online. But look for embroidery thread. It's not terribly expensive. And then you need a large needle. If anybody needs these supplies and needs me to make them like a little kit and they can come pick it up, I can do that because I have lots of embroidery thread and lots of needles. Okay, so you decide on your color palette. I'm going to make the taco orange and yellow, and I'm going to make the product design words in purple. And you want to look at your colors and think about how they're going to show up on your background. This purple I think is a little bit too dark. You wouldn't really see it very well since this is a black apron. I like this one a lot better. Maybe if you wanted like shading and get real fancy, you could use both. But I think I'll go with that purple. And I might keep it just real simple and do just the orange and purple. I think I'll do that. So I'm going to take a length of thread, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of the stitching process, and then I'll add later to this video once it's finished. One trick that I can't do with my mask on, if it's just you, is that you can lick the end of the thread. Oops, sorry, I thought I was doing that on the camera. If you lick the end of the thread, it's easier to put through the needle, but of course you would want that to be only your thread and only your needle, because we're not sharing any germs. Okay, when you first start embroidery, you always want to start on the back side of your piece, of your work, because that way you can tie a knot and it's hidden, so you don't see the knot on your final one. I'm going to start in this corner of the taco and poke through. And then I'm going to do a small stitch. Let's see if you can see this. Maybe like a centimeter. The smaller you make your stitches, the more detailed your image will be. But I pulled it through. You notice I did not tie a knot in the end of my string. Instead, I'm going to pull it through carefully, not to pull through the whole thing, and actually tie this string to the other one, to the long one. This first one, I'm tying a knot. Leave the tail kind of long because you can always tie more things to it later. Do at least 2 knots, but preferably 3. And on the third one, pull pretty tight. If you pull too tight, you can break this stuff, but you'll get the hang of it as you work with it. Okay, so then from there, I'm going to do something that I think is called a running stitch. I'm not super familiar with embroidery, but I'm kind of moving the needle underneath the piece, and I can see where the needle is, so I'm trying to get it right on that white line. Oh, sorry. Right on the white line, and poke back up from the bottom. Now I've made some distance, but there's a big gap right here. So before I go on to do the next stitch, I'm going to go back through this first hole that I created to fill in that gap. So you kind of do 2 motions for every stitch that you're making. There are lots of tutorials for embroidery online by people who are better at it than I am. So if there's something specific you want to do or you want to get real fancy, I would suggest looking on YouTube at embroidery tutorial. I'll do 1 more stitch and then we'll speed it up and we can watch the process. Going in from the back. And you want to flip your work a lot to make sure that it's not tangling on the back, or sometimes it'll get tangled up and then you'll have like this big loop on the back. You don't want that. So just kind of flip back and forth and make sure it's doing what you want it to do. I made that stitch a little bit too long. If your stitches are longer, it'll just look more angular. So I came up here and now I'm going back to fill in this gap. This is how you would do any kind of line work with thread. Starting to look like a taco. Not really. Okay, I'm gonna speed this up and enjoy.